Thank you, Brother Richard, and thank you, brothers and sisters of Philadelphia. And it is an honor to be asked to come and speak to the Marcus Garvey African Lecture Series for the UNIA with a very long and illustrious history. And I'll try to do my best to be clear in speaking on these points related to the issues of melanin as it relates to black dot. What is black dot? What is melanin? I'm certain many of you have already had some exposure to these very old concepts. The name melanin is not the Kemetic name. It's probably more of a Greek name or thereabouts. And it was used in referring to a person, a certain mythological story that probably has African roots. The mythological story is one in which supposedly Europa, who was a goddess of types, and she and her girlfriends were walking along the seashore, and the god Zeus, who we now know was just the Europeanized version of a much older god type that was African in nature. But supposedly Zeus saw Europa and then became interested in her and then changed himself into a white bull. And then Europa got on the back of the white bull, and the bull rolled across the ocean to the island of Crete. Well, that certainly is a Europeanized version. I don't know what the African roots of it are. But in this concept, one of the children of this union was that of Melanin, a Melano, and it referred to black. Another reference refers to melanin as referring to the blackness that occurs in the sky when the sun sets in the west. Now, both of these versions are found in the book Black Athena by Martin Bernal, the second volume. There's another reference to melanin, which refers to another mythological story in which Melanos was a man who overheard some snakelets. The mother of a snake family was killed, and the snakelets were left without anyone, and he befriended the snakes and fed them, and as a sign of return, they taught him how to communicate telepathically with the animal kingdom. So what is a common thread in all this? One, certainly has to do with blackness. Two, it has to do with extraordinary powers. From whose point of view are these powers extraordinary? Why aren't they ordinary powers? And if they are ordinary powers, what kind of game is being played to make them seem to be extraordinary? In the book that has just been recently released by John Henry Clark, Africa at the Crossroads, World Revolution, he makes known a very important point that was earlier made by Adam Ben Sertima, that in this year, 1992, suppose somebody is going to celebrate, come October, the 500-year anniversary of somebody named Christopher Colombo, who is said to have discovered people who greeted him in a more humanized state on the seashore, and within a matter of 2 or 3 years he had killed them off by the millions. And so John Henry Clark calls this and Van Sertima called this the 500-year room. The great lie, the great game of cover-up to hide a whole nother worldview, a whole history, if you will, biological history and written history of all of humanity, to present a great lie that models the world in the image of a child and hides the biological realities of the parent. So this is critical. So this I'm saying that as we enter into the discussions of melanin, there has been a reversal and a lie going on that tries to cover up the biological records of what the the man who has hue, or human, people of color, what your true biological potentials are. And there's a great cover-up, a great lie, just as there is in the written history. So here we go. Now, there are 3 documents that are available for you today, and I'm going to draw upon them as we kind of march through some things. One is the book, The African Origin of Biological Psychiatry. And this is a book that I have worked on for at least, oh goodness, all of my adult life. And then it was published in the journal Uraeus, which is a publication of the Aquarian Spiritual Center in Los Angeles from the years 1982 through 1978 through 1982. These are the articles that I contributed. And there are other articles published thereafter. And in this came the series of articles named Uraeus, parts 1 through 4, and Black Dot, parts 1 through 3. Earlier work had been done on esoteric theory of press theory, and earlier work and then more recent work was published that was never published anyplace else, and that was on the Eye of Horus as it is defined in the pyramid text, and the Eye of Horus as it is defined in the coffin text. The pyramid text, or the text of ancient Egypt, dating from the time of the Old Kingdom, 3000 BC to about 2200 BC, or roughly almost 5,000 years ago. The coffin text, or the Middle Kingdom text, roughly about 2200 to about 1800 or so BC. That's the middle period. So these are the religious texts in which we find that Africans had talked about melanin under the heading of the word Kim, K-M. What does Kim mean? It means black. And as Carol Bourne in his book did make known, that the study of chemistry, study of Chem black, is really the study of blackness. In particular, the study of organic chemistry. The study of those chemicals that contain large amounts of the atom known as carbon, C-A-R-B-O-N. Carbon, the same atom that makes up diamond earrings, diamond rings, crystalline form, but in its more liquid form, it is blackness. The graphite on your pencil? What about the blackness on your skin? The black in your coloring of your eyes? The black in your brain, yes, melanin in the core of the brain. So that in this book, we reviewed, especially in Black Dots Part 1, 2, and 3, the biological record of blackness as it operates in biological systems from before birth, from conception, all the way through the gestation in the mother's womb and the birth thereafter. We could show blackness in every life stage. But yet, the great lie continues that blackness is a sign of being inferior. Blackness, or melanin, the chemical that is responsible for black pigmentation, is a sign of being second-rate, of being dirty, of being more like an animal, of being not as advanced as those people who have golden hair and light skin. And that is the biggest lie that was ever put out. It is a lie that goes against life itself. I could take right now today any member of the most racist organization, the most virulent racist possible, and I could dissect them this minute and show huge amounts of melanin in the core of their brain, in the lining of their eye, in the neurons, cell junctions in their inner ear, in their skin in places, in their heart, lungs, kidneys, any organ in their body, and I can say now tell me what you're saying about blackness. You want to call them of being an inferiority. You could not even be conceived without melanin. No way. So again, those are in Black Dots Part 1, 2, and 3. Let's go through some examples, and I'll kind of work it on through. The examples of it is that there's melanin present in your mother's egg and the father's spermatozoa. And when these two cells meet, the egg is fertilized by the spermatozoa, and the DNA from both cells join together. Where is our dear friend melanin? It is present in the outer layer of this fertilized egg. So the outer layer of the fertilized egg, or zygote, or what you call a blastula stage, later a gastrula stage, or the ectoderm, is black. Contains black pigment. And this is true of not only blacks, Asians, and browns. It's true of mammals, higher primates, advanced mammals, lower mammals, amphibians, reptiles, birds, fish. Any animal that has a backbone has the same pattern. And why is that the case? Because melanin is God's felt point pen. What do we mean by that? That melanin is a neurotoxic agent. What is neurotoxic? Toxic, to develop lines of growth, neurons. Melanin sets up electromagnetic gradients or lines of force by which, as the cells develop, they migrate along these lines, just as you might have a blueprint, and station themselves along the lines of these electromagnetic fields. So melanin is the blueprint drawer in any living animal that has a backbone. Going further, this outer layer of cells invaginates and becomes a tube. And the end of that tube balloons out and becomes, guess what? Brain. The tube is the spinal column. The ball at the other end becomes the brain. All this are occurring from melanated ectoderm, from a fertilized ovum by a spermatozoa. The end of the tube, which balloons out, is known as the blackness is a sign of something that doesn't even matter as much as whiteness. But yet I'm saying to you that if you go to these biological references in any medical school library, Science Magazine, New England Journal of Medicine, any other standard medical journals, you will find tons of references showing the black basis of organization of the entire body. So those are absolutely critical points to consider. Furthermore, going a little bit furthermore with it, there have been pigment cell conferences held every 2 to 4 years, starting in the late 1940s, in which scientists from around the world, in particular South Africa, they had a ready supply of black bodies to do their horrible fiendish work. And probably that's not unique to South Africa. Probably we can look at what happened in jail systems here in these states, and it's no different. But we notice that the research does not fit the political agenda. So when you go through these research journals, you have to be aware that people are writing in ways that they were trying to pull information out, but then you as a black person have a responsibility to make it applicable to your people. They will not, for example, tell you that yes, there are hormonal differences in black people as compared to white. They will not tell you that black folks tend to have lower white blood cell counts because of the difference in the level of the secretion of adrenal steroids. That will not be mentioned. They will not talk about the differences that occur in terms of other hormones. That will not be discussed in elaborate detail at all. But going further, we find that these various glands that are pictured in the pineal, pictured in the entire human body, and their black origins, they have formed a system called the apid cell series, standing for those cells that have the same properties because they all originate from the same original site. These cells are called the amine precursor uptake decarboxylase. What does all that mean? That all of these cell types have the same common feature. They all have an enzyme that can break off carbon atoms. What is a carbon atom? The atom that makes up melanin. So they have the ability to shape and mold the melanin molecule, and those molecules are chemical children of melanin. So that's a very, very important feature. But notice, again, Africans talked very heavily about chem. They spoke about what? When you speak about going into the study of melanin, and in particular you pay attention to the study of the pineal gland. What is the pineal gland? The pineal gland is a gland present in all humans. And again, most animals with a backbone. This is a gland that's present right in the center of the head. It is known as the third eye. It is a gland that's referred to in the East Indian literature as the third eye. But Africans called it what? They called it the eye of Horus. And what was being meant by the eye of Horus? It was said that Horus, who was the son of Osiris and Isis, got into a battle one day. You see, his father had been offended, had been violated, had been killed, cut into pieces by his father Osiris, had been done all these bad deeds by this evil brother named Set, Set Typhon. And so when Horus came into contact with Set later on, of course, Horus had some dues that he wanted to charge Set. And Set didn't want to pay. So they got into a battle, the great battle at arms. And as they fought, it was said that Set hit Horus in the eye and shattered the eye of Horus. But Horus struck a mean blow. Horus snatched off the testicles of Set, and that was it. But that would usually be the end of the fight. These are, again, are symbolic stories, but also literal stories. And we have to look at some of the literalism of them in just a minute. It is speaking further that the god Jehudi, or Thoth, the moon god Jehudi, the god of wisdom, the so-called the perfect example of intellect, the so-called the heart of sun god Ra, the super genius. This was the example of the multi-genius even before the time of Imhotep. Brought the eye of Horus, the sound eye of Horus, back from across the river and put in a regenerated new eye in Horus, and even gave poor Set his stuff back to keep these cosmic forces in balance so they could continue their drama. So we have a notion that Horus has a new eye after battling evil. So it raises a question that they're saying in some respects that just as on a cosmic plane, that the forces of light and darkness are in constant struggle, constant interaction, so too on a human plane are humans, people with hue, involved in a struggle with their own Sethian nature. to hold on to it. And then in this struggle, many times their vision gets blurry. And they have to develop a new eye, a new way of seeing, based upon their ability to contain and to stop the reproduction of their own internal evil. You hear what I'm saying? Very delicate point. Now, I submit to you, fellow Africans, that Africans had studied the science of the mind so strong and so sweet that they had not only discovered the location of the soul, but the neurochemistry of the soul and its relationship to blackness. So now we get way beyond Sigmund Freud, way beyond Cortinelli, way beyond Russell Ritter. Now we're coming on back home to a study of the African true science of neuropharmacology, without all this fanfare and cover-up. So going further, we find these kind of things. We find that the pineal gland, again, was the name of the eye of Peru. We find that in the pyramid text and coffin text, over 100 references to the eye of Peru. It says that the eye of Peru is present in the forehead, and it rises up as thy father Ra, the sun, passes overhead. Meaning what? Something in the forehead is turned on by the sun. That was 3,333 years before Axelrod and Workman rediscovered the pineal gland was an active gland, producing a unique enzyme called HIOMT. But notice further, it said that at the pineal, that there were blue eyes, green eyes, and red eyes, and black eyes of Peru. And that it was possible to rise, and that the mission was to rise up with your eye of Peru to the heavens and to become a star. Not a Hollywood star on Hollywood Boulevard. That's not the star they're talking about. But a star in terms of the cosmos. They envision these kind of very strong powers. We find furthermore that the pineal gland is a gland that produces two major hormones. One during daylight, another one during nighttime. During daytime, a hormone known as serotonin is released. Serotonin has many important powers. One of its powers is also involved. There are many very important neurotransmitters that are related to serotonin that are involved in states of depression and normal affect. But the hormone that we're going to talk about today is a hormone known as melatonin. M-E-L-A-T-O-N-I-N. Melatonin. Now this, my brothers and sisters, is a powerful, powerful black hormone. This one is so strong that you can just sit back and just sing on it. Melatonin, it is released as soon as the sun goes down. It rises and reaches its peak around midnight, from midnight to 1 a.m. And then it begins to taper off, and it tapers off and stops right before sunrise. Now notice this, that during the dark hours, a hormone is released by a gland in the brain, and this gland in the brain, this hormone is so powerful, it affects the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and many other organs throughout the body. So here we have one kind of hormone being released during during nighttime. What is the hormone that is released during the daytime that operates in concert with melatonin? I don't believe it's so much serotonin. I believe it is the hormone known as vitamin D. I have to give you all these names so we can play with them in just a minute. It won't be, just bear with me for a little while longer. Vitamin D. How is vitamin D made? Where is vitamin D? What does it do? Now, we've spoken about the pineal gland. Again, the pineal gland in the brain forms the posterior floor of the third ventricle, whereas the anterior or front part is where the pituitary is. You know, the pituitary produces the hormones that are involved in the control of your sexual cycles, FSH, follicle-stimulating hormone, LH, luteinizing hormone. The hormones that are involved in the growth hormone that determine your bone growth and your control of metabolism. Your thyroid hormone, thyroid-releasing hormone, TRF, and TSH, all these hypothalamus pituitary complex, prolactin, very, very other important, vasopressin, a number of different hormones. But again, being very heavily controlled by the pineal melatonin. But in the skin, we have the melanocytes that are present in skin. They have been present from the time of during the growth of the fetus. Again, remember the neural crest, where that tube formed and then the end of the tube ballooned out, and the tip of that tube is called the neural crest. And from that place, the neural crest, these cell types then moved out, and they moved all over the body, and they positioned themselves right where the dermis or deep layer of skin met the upper layer of skin called the epidermis. And right at that junction is where we find the position of the melanocytes. Melanocytes do some very powerful things. They secrete the hormone known as melanin, not melatonin, but melanin, into skin cells as these skin cells grow up from their bed. And it injects the melanin into the skin cells. It passes by this junctional layer and moves upward. Just like it looks like a hypodermic needle being put right inside the cell and given its shot of melanin. The melanin, as it goes into the cell, then organizes itself as a uniform or a block sheet over the nucleus of the cell to protect the cell from ultraviolet radiation. And why is that important? It's important because these intense rays of the sun, when it hits the nucleus of the cell, may knock out certain codes in that DNA and call for misreading of the code, and the cell will then will die or become cancerous. Now, I've spent most of my time out on the West Coast, and they had this thing called the Beach Boys and the Surfer Bunnies and all this, where all of those folks who spent, white folks, without much melanin in their skin, without any protection, by the age 28, 27, the skin was shot. It looked like it was the skin of a person who was 50 years old. Had lost its elasticity, full of holes, big pores, didn't even have the normal perspiration you and I ordinarily have. And many of them have long since passed on with skin cancer or had various skin lesions. So that's the result of not having your right kind of shield. But again, what does melanin do in another kind of way? The melanin present in that layer of skin provides a very important role, which plays a critical part of the history of the unfoldment of the human family and the unraveling to the degree of the human family. In the deeper layer of skin, where the blood vessels are, the hormone known as vitamin D passes through in blood. Passes in blood. It is formed in an inactive state called vitamin D1 and D2. As sunlight penetrates the skin, it actually energizes the hormone and makes it into an active form called vitamin D3, D4. The active form of vitamin D, as it passes through your intestinal tract, is what pulls calcium out of food into your body. Without the active form of vitamin D, you could eat all the calcium that you would want, and it would run right through, and you would have very little calcium being retained in your body. People who lack vitamin D develop a condition known as rickets, bow bones, bow legs, notchy ribs, soft bones. Women in their later years who have problems with vitamin D metabolism also develop osteoporosis, soft bones, stooped over, How many of you seen black women stoop over like this in their 50s or their 60s? Not a regular occurrence. What about others? Oh, rather common. So what we're saying is that vitamin D in the inner layer, deeper layer of skin, as it is being energized by sunlight, is a critical thing to consider. But notice, we all know by this point in time that all people of the human family came from Africa. And people who came from this parent stock indeed had black skin. There's no way that you're going to be able to survive in Africa near the equator with intense ultraviolet light and sunlight and not have dark skin. Without dark skin, you will fry. Your skin cells will become cancerous and you will not survive. But as our people with skin color moved to other parts of the planet, i.e. Europe, and especially past the 54-degree latitude, it was okay for a while until the periodic ice age would come on. When the ice ages came on, those people who had dark skin color had a problem. Because dark skin in a condition in which you don't have much sunlight and a very low angle of sunlight in the sky and large amounts of cloud cover is dangerous. You will tend to develop a condition known as rickets, in which the sunlight, you're not receiving much sunlight, you're wearing animal furs to stay warm, the sunlight is of a very weak strength, it cannot penetrate the dark skin color upper layer of skin enough to energize vitamin D. And therefore those people develop very little active forms of vitamin D and develop rickets. What does that mean? When we look at the skeletons of people in the beginning of the Ice Age, what do we see? Black people with rickets. We see the skeleton, we see the ricket bone type. And we look at it further on to the Ice Age, the rickets is no longer there, meaning what? That their skin color became progressively lighter and they could make vitamin D. But what was the problem? Did you develop vitamin D and you lost your skin color and you survived? But what was the penalty? At what price? And here is a very, very critical point. You developed that at the risk of developing too much calcium in your body and you lost your spiritual vision. What do you mean by that, Dr. King? That calcium, present in large amounts, began to calcify the pineal gland. So we find that European populations, European African populations, that the pineal is calcified in the majority of the adult population. And 60-80% and above in European populations in Boston, San Francisco, Stockholm, Sweden, calcified pineals. In black populations, 5 to 15%. And the darker the population, the lower the incidence. In Nigeria, 5%. Cincinnati, 10%. Watts, California, 15%. In a calcified pineal, the pineal releases only 1/2 as much hormone as a non-calcified pineal. That means, so in other words, we're saying that people who survived in Ice Age Europe did survive. They lost rickets. They couldn't make vitamin D because they had light skin. And they couldn't make enough vitamin D in those Ice Age conditions. But they had a reduced level of spiritual vision. They had that then, and they sure enough have it now. Sure enough have it now. That's very clear. So now we have a crossroads in which history and biology and chemistry are saying the same thing. Despite the big lie. Despite the big lie. Dr. King, in science, there is no such thing as bias. Says who? Whose science? Printed in whose textbook? Funded by whose funding source? No. Science is through the mind of a man and a woman. And if they've got a bias, they will express their bias. Science has a very, very enchained legacy, if you will, in covering up and not being true to its traditions. Science is not a God. It's the people who write their versions of science. And the same racial that you experience in the historical text, it is certainly rampant in the biological and chemical text, and certainly in when we speak about these points. So, coming back to the central point, that when Cheikh Anta Diop, in his book Civilization of Barbarism, speaks about the development of the Cro-Magnon type as being the emergence of the Caucasian community from their black Hottentot parents, which he does say. And he identifies the location at which this took place in Basque, Spain. He says that, and it took place between 20 and 25,000 years ago. That's right in Cheikh Anta Diop's Civilization of Barbarism. And he said that as the glaciers began to recede, that the Cro-Magnon Caucasoids went north with the glacier. They liked the ice. They had become conditioned to it. They moved north into Scandinavia, and then they went east into Russia, and further east into some parts further in near Asia. And then they turned south and invaded Greece. You hear what I'm saying? Invaded Greece and invaded India. And then came back around through what is called the Middle East, so-called Lebanon and Israel, and invaded Kemet. But notice what was said in the 9th dynasty about Egyptian pharaoh in Margaret Lightman's book, Ancient Egyptian Literature, said this, that this pharaoh in the 9th dynasty, during a time of turmoil, says, oh, lo, there go the lowly Asiatics. They come from the mountaintops. They have their hands outstretched, they're hungry, and they have been fighting since the time of Horus, meaning that these people come from mountain regions, they have a paranoid mentality, they have a greedy mentality, they're starved, literally, and they're always fighting. They call them Asiatics not because they originated in Asia, but because that's where we saw them first appear, when they came out of Asia, but they had started off farther back than that in the western regions of Eurasia, in the areas near the junction of France and Spain. So that's a little bit of the background. So we have another line. We have history, biology, and chemistry all crisscrossing the same thing. That somebody with a different kind of consciousness, with a different eye for Peru, came in to our home, and he was paranoid, he was violent, and he was hungry. And he's been that way for a long, long time. So that was said before 2000 BC. And we knew his condition. Now, furthermore, it raised a question that when we look into another book that is called Thoth, the Hermes of Egypt by Bolin. Now I'm going to stop being the lecturer and now I'm going to be the school teacher. Thoth, the Hermes of Egypt by Bolin, it is said that Set used to not be a negative god. It was a god of the south. But following the invasion of the Hyksos, that the attributes of Set, which used to be positive, were then transferred to Jehudi or Thoth, and Set became labeled as the devil. And anybody with red skin was considered Set-like. Now, we're going to understand that. Somebody with very fair skin came through the desert, got sunburned, and they were paranoid, they were violent, and they were hungry. So we said, oh yeah, those red skin, sunburned skin means you have this kind of condition. You're devilish. So we began to equate, we began to look at a cosmic issue of the balancing of dark, light and dark, not which weren't originally considered good and evil. That was just the forces of nature. And we began to see the expression of a person who lacked moral strength, if you will, who couldn't keep their Sethian condition in focus. Their Sethian condition was wild and wicked. It was running the show, and it wasn't being balanced by my eye. If anything, it was in a celebration of Sethian ideals that they were involved in. Some people love blood. Some people love violence. Despite what they might say, some people get off with what we call a sadistic nature. Jeffrey Dahmer loved it. I'm temporary in North Carolina, and a guy down there ate up his best friend and his girlfriend. He came in on him. He had people's genitalia inside of a jar. That's not new news. There are many people who are necrophiliacs. There are many people who are cannibals. And again, the game of history is to do what? Is to take my impulses and my desires and to say that they're yours. Project them onto you. Make you appear to be what my own desires are. So that's a game. That's a hustle. But back to it, this person named Bolin makes the point of saying that the attributes of Seth were transferred to Tahuti, and then Set became identified with not a cosmic condition, but to a human struggle between populations. An invader type called the Hiskos, these so-called invading mulattoes, say it like it is, people who had many times been forced because the invading people had taken advantage of the family, killed off the daddy, raped the mother, and took the children of the mother as slaves and made them into their brainwashed slaves. So the children are still trying to gain daddy's acceptance, and daddy don't even care about it. He's just going to play on them and turn them out too. That game we see played time and time again. So that with this group invaded in, and then they're forced out in a war of liberation. Some say 75 years, some say 350, some say 500 years, in which when the brothers came from the 17th dynasty, he's being led by a very famous sister named Teddy Cherie. Teddy Cherie is an elegant lady. Of course, she was the mother of Nefertari. But Teddy Cherie's husband, they rose up, and their children able to start the wars of liberation. And those brothers got so strong in the 18th dynasty, sisters got so strong, they chased those people all the way back to their home base, all the way back in northern Eurasia, and locked them up for 1,000 years minimum. Strong battles. But long story made short, please hear that the Ayah Faru is the statement of what Africans really are about. They said that there was a regenerated eye that could come on when a person had fought with their evil. So they had two different conditions. They had I'll give you an example, the educational system that you already heard about. How many of you read George James' Stolen Legacy? I see a show of hands. Oh, most in this room. And so you've read in chapter 3 that in the education that there were 3 grades of students. The grade of neophyte, the grade of intelligence, and the grade of sons of light. And you've read that in a neophyte stage that you study the laws of nature and you practice the 10 virtues. In other words, you study physical science and you also contain or develop your own inner science by practice of the virtues. And as one did that, then one developed a condition called inner vision. Inner vision, my sisters and brothers, is an activated pineal gland. Do you hear that? That when you had developed inner vision,
you had developed the sound eye. Jehudi, the god of magic, science, and writing, then had given you a vast expansion of intellect. So it'd say that Africans knew, in other words, at that point in time, you were able to be consciously aware and to move through your ka, the Ka. You could take your mind and project it in time and space. Be telepathic. You could really tap your genius mind. In other words, you knew that the mind had a supercomputer potential. It could pull memories from any ancestral memory that anyone who made up your bloodline ever had. Be it a grandfather, great-great-great-great-grandfather, mother, or whatever. And you could also pull ideas from the future. That when you reach this level, that you can then truly be a living God while on earth, even the fleshly body. So can you understand, with that kind of knowledge, why it is critical that the oppressor has to cover up what our potential really is? Your pineal gland is not likely to be calcified. But his is. Your potential is the same as his, but also far greater. Now, I do not know what they can do to decalcify their pineals, because that is dependent upon a person wanting to decalcify their pineals. And I submit to you that some people love being like Seth in a negative fashion. But it's very, very important to consider what other issues that do come up. Let's just read, for example, what some of these statements are, what we said about ourselves. Oh, take the eye of Horus. Prevent him meaning Seth, from consuming it. O.N., take the eye of Horus, the garment of which the gods are afraid of. O.N., Horus has attached his eye to your forehead for you, in his name, great of magic. O.N., take that of which the gods are afraid, just as they are afraid of Horus. Take the eye of Horus against which Seth acted. In other words, you have to really struggle with it. And that the struggle involved a study of science and living a virtuous life. Now, the virtues, it's a list of 10 virtues and stolen legacy. You can also read about the 42 negative confessions that are cited in the Book of Coming Forth by Day, also cited by Budge, also very heavily cited by our own illustrious Dr. Yusef Ben Jarkana. But these are ethical ways, moral ways of relating to your family members in a way that will help you both to prosper. And also, it will help you to stay on the good side of the ancestral world. Because truly, to do things that run against your family line will mean that the ancestors who do live in us will cut us off from inner knowledge. Now, in the same notion, let us consider some other aspects. We've already covered that the melanin is a biologically active chemical present in skin cells that is also present in other organs in the body, brain, lungs, liver. That the pineal gland is a gland present in the brain that produces a hormone known as melatonin during darkness. And the hormone melatonin affects the production of melanin in skin through the pituitary, MSH, melanocyte-stimulating hormone. And it also very profoundly affects all the major glands in the body. We've also considered how the melanin, as it's exposed to light, determines the formation of vitamin D, and how vitamin D controls calcium being pulled back into the body. We didn't say this, but I can say it now, that vitamin D is a powerful hormone that acts in concert with melatonin. So just as melatonin acts upon the body to produce one kind of, usually a tranquilizing effect, that the vitamin D is an activating hormone, so it is the signal inside of the body of being exposed to sunlight. So it is what is called a somatotropic hormone. It makes things grow. Now, all this being said, is to come to the key point, and the key point is that melanin is a doorway by which energies can move from the physical material level up to the spiritual level. It's a divine molecule. It's a life molecule. And in those things that were first, imagine this, in the very beginnings of life on this planet, 4.5 billion years ago, that those life-living chemicals could actually take sunlight, hold on to sunlight, and convert into a chemical that can be used as food so that an animal could reproduce itself, or the plant reproduce itself. So that's a critical point. Melanin is present in the eye, for example. The inner lining of the eye. You can even see black, white, or color only because you have melanin in your eye. In the layer of the eye called the pigment layer of the retina, it is a layer that as the rods and cones share their discs of photopigment, and the discs again have captured photons, particles of light entering the eye. And as it hits upon that layer, the melanin plucks the photon of light out of the carrier molecule that for color vision or black and white vision, and converts it into an electrical charge. That's true of all eyes, be it black, white, green, or whatever. There's melanin present in the inner ear, that when you hear sound waves, the inner ear nucleus that has pigment, it converts a mechanical wave into an electrical wave, an electrical thing. So notice sound, vision, all these things very heavily involved in melanin. But let's take a little bit of a different track. You're being very patient as I'm kind of going through this in a kind of slow style there. Let's look at it from another standpoint. And I should also mention that melanin is also, that the pineal gland in particular, is involved as an anti-cancer hormone. It slows down the productions of cancer, especially breast cancer. That the pineal hormone melatonin is very actively involved in the woman's menstrual cycle, and that people can develop amenorrhea or a lack of a menstrual cycle because of adaptation with the pineal. For example, when a woman goes through a long fast, she many times will become amenorrheic. When she goes through a period of stress, intense stress, her menstrual cycle can get thrown off, and that is operating through the pineal melatonin, which is a stress hormone. We also know that the pineal hormone melatonin are profoundly influenced not only by sunlight, but also by magnetic fields, especially the Earth's magnetic field. So all these things are there. There are various illnesses, if you will, that are treated. These are states of depression that are treated by what? By exposing you to sunlight at a certain time of the night. There's a condition called seasonal affective disorder. And when people become depressed from the time, usually from October through about March, during the time of low sunlight or winter, and that they become irritable and cranky and mean and sluggish, and they also develop abnormal sleep patterns, they develop cravings for sweets, the sugar-free, and all those kind of things, and that the treatment for is expose them usually to an hour or two of sunlight of a certain kind of strength during the nighttime hours to extend their amount of sunlight exposure. And that in itself is a treatment. And it is done so by reducing the amount of melatonin that is present in a person's system. We find that in conditions like depression and schizophrenia, the hormone melatonin is present in lower amounts. So again, we can tie all these things in. The various medications that are used to treat for depression, lithium, antidepressants, operate through pineal hormones, very important. So there's a long list of things, and again, I went through painful detail to review a number of those, and it is present in this paper, which is a new paper called the Eye of Peru, which is available in the back, and this is a review of the biological medical research of the pineal gland in the past 10 or 11 years. So this is new work that has come out since I wrote the book, and so this is the very newest thing, and it will probably be out just as one time, because I will when it goes into the new book that I'm working on, the Eye of Peru, the editor usually shrinks things. So that's a struggle that all writers have to bear with. I'm certain I'll have to deal with it too. But let's look at it from a different perspective. In this, I'm going to use another paper that is also available called Kinetic Images of Light, Sunlight and Moonlight. Now, after this, we're going to stop and have questions. So this won't take too much longer. Just bear with me. If we ask the question of sunlight as it impacts upon biological systems, especially because the skin is the first eye, as one author has said. The skin is the first eye. The pineal gland is the second eye, and these two eyes are the third and fourth eyes. Because in the early life forms, the first eye that came into being was the skin. It was this thing which would receive light and convert it into its various forms. In the older life forms, the animal forms had eyes in the front of the head and eyes in the back of the head. And the eyes in the back of the head withdrew into the brain and became a gland in the higher life forms. The lower life form, it remains, for example, in the western fence lizard, as an eye on the top of the head. But in the more advanced forms, such as humans, primates, it became a gland, still reacting to light, still releasing hormones in relation to light and darkness. In the Kemetic concepts, again, this new paper that was just written, of images of sunlight and moonlight, Africans had very particular concepts for sunlight and moonlight. When it came to sunlight, they saw light in three different aspects. They saw it in terms of the sunrise, the full noonday sun, and sunset. Sunrise was pictured as a god Khepra, Khepera, a god which was pictured as a dung beetle rolling a ball, the sun, across the sky. Now, Khepra was used for a particular reason, because it seemed to portray the African knowledge of immortality. They knew that in the human condition, there was something in the human that didn't die. That when it had gone so far and appeared to be dead, something new would come out of it and take life all over again. And so they observed the dung beetle, which would roll a ball of animal, usually elephant or a large animal like that, feces across the floor of the savannah, and put it in a hole and bury its larva inside, that from this ball of dead fecal matter, here came new life, new animals bursting out and flying away. So again, the morning sun, something about the sun being born again was critical. The noonday sun was pictured as Horus Ben-Hetep, or the sun in its full radiant power. And you can read about this in The Gods of the Egyptians by Wallace Budge. But it was said to have been made by the Besnet, or the so-called blacksmiths. The Horus Ben-Hetep is a very, very ancient title. It goes all the way to the beginnings of Egypt. It goes all the way to the beginnings of Ethiopia, which preceded Egypt. It goes all the way to the beginnings of a place known as Kui land, the place in the Mountain of the Moon regions between the western Mountain of the Moon, the Rwenzori mountain range with 12 peaks and one central peak, and the eastern Mountain of the Moon, or Kilimanjaro. It goes to the beginning of the Ainu people, the so-called Homo erectus type, that type which over 1 million years ago, these Africans later went out and populated the entire planet. So that's Horus Ben-Hetep, and that takes you back a taste. And when you get to that in studying the issue of the blacksmith, and not only the blacksmith seeth Etfu, but also asking the questions of Horus Ben-Hetep and the Ainu population of where did they originate from. And so when you come across a story, which I won't have time to get, well, I'll touch one lightly here, the story of Ifa. Now remember Ifa, for those of you who have studied of Yoruba are familiar with Ifa, I'm certain, where Ifa speaks to a certain traditional system of science, if you will, of the relationship to the Orishas and to the deities of the unseen realm. But Ifa was also pictured as the first Twa person who made a mind map of the unconscious. Ifa was said to have gone, and this comes from the book, the Pigment by Halley. Ifa was said to have gone inside the mouth of the moon. What does that mean? Ifa went inside of his own mind. Ifa went to the inner realm. And he was chasing a black pig, a black boar. And Ifa had these 3 spears. And Ifa was a hero hunter. He chased the boar inside the hill. And he said he took all 3 spears to throw them to slay this boar, or this pig. And he killed it. But the pig was too big to bring out. It's too big to carry out. So Ifa went on outside and got a rope to tie around the pig and pull it out. But when he went back inside with his rope, the pig was gone. And he saw a bloody trail going further on down inside the mountain of the moon. But Ifa, being fearless, went right on behind him. And he heard some noise as he went on down further. And lo and behold, he came across a woman with a white face who was a sorceress from the land of the dead. And you have to listen to the symbolism. This story is over 1,000,000 years old. Listen to the story. And he says, and the woman tells him, "Are you dead?" He said, "No, I'm not dead. I just came in here by chance. I just went inside my inner mind by chance. I got tricked." And she says, "Oh, why don't you come with me and spend the night with me, try to get sweet with him?" And he was repulsed by her coming up like that. She wasn't an attractive white face soul at all. He was turned off. But next thing you knew, she got close to him and checked the mood. She got close to him and she jumped on his back and rode him and says, "Now you go to my village. Brothers beware." Beware. Rode him to the village and said, "You're going to stay here for a while." He said, "Oh, I want to go home." "You got to stay here a while." Then the husband of the chief came up and said, "Are you dead?" He said, "No, I'm not dead." No, he asked the question, "Are you dead?" "No, I'm not dead." He said, "We got to stay here for a while." And so Ifa stayed there. He sat on a stool. The stool stuck to his behind. Again, the issue of the archon stool and royalty. We have to consider all those points. And so then Ifa began to do the dance of the gods, to entertain these people. These people were so depressed. They were so gloomy and dreary. Does that sound familiar? That they needed Ifa to entertain them. Look at the parallel in today's world. What is our role to the oppressor? Entertainment. Service. Don't think, don't challenge, just entertain. Keep us happy with your dance. Now there are many levels in which to interpret this. This is one for certain. So after about 4 months had passed, you have to ask 4 months of what kind of year? Was it a 4 months of a regular 362-day cycle year? Was it 4 months of a great year of 25,000, how many years? If it's that kind of year, then you're talking about 6,000 years. And 6,000 would bring you from the year 4,000, the year in which the first dynasty came on, that we currently agree to, up to today. Or April, I want us to say it, April 29, 1992, Rodney King time. Or the end of the 500-year cycle from Christopher Columbus in 1492 up to 1992, in time which the Europeans were able to gain control over 2 continents, North America and South America, and even over our homeland. So very important questions being dealt. But I'm just saying all this, all that, I got off the track, please. All that is tied into the noonday sun, Horus Ben Hutep. Horus Ben Hutep, in the Horus Ben Hutep story, is a warrior story. It speaks of all the ways in which Horus dealt on Seth. and how Horace, the kind of moves Horace had to develop to deal on set. And Horace was absolutely ferocious. Oh, just sweet-witted. Went all over the country cleaning up his country. So it serves as a model of how we can clean up certain tendencies in ourselves, be it jealousy between Africans, paranoia between Africans, or fear of confrontation with the lost ones. And very much the fear of confrontation with our fulfilling our own true purpose in life, whatever our spiritual mission might be. So we have the noonday sun Kepler, the rising sun Kepler, noonday sun Horus and Hutep, the setting sun of Tumu. Now Tumu is another common, a very powerful concept. Tumu, the god of the setting sun. Tumu was said to be the first human to be worshipped as a god. Tumu was said to be the first man. So in other words, Tumu is the correct name for the original Adam, not Adam. That was the name we used for our own concept of Adam. It was the name Tim or Tumu. Now these various concepts of light indeed were considered in terms of the pineal gland or the eye of Peru. Let us consider one other aspect, and that has to do with the concept of the moon. A very critical thing, because when does the pineal hormone melatonin operate? During darkness. And I submit to you, brothers and sisters, that part of our enslavement, mental slavery, the oppressor knows who you truly are. He knows he can't compete. That's known. As long as they practice certain negative conditions, can't compete. But they're hung up on practicing certain negative conditions. They love it too sweetly. It's between them and their God to come to terms with that. I, as a psychiatrist, I cannot make anybody get better who doesn't want to get better. I have no control at all. We just play games. And I have a lot of people who play games. Lots and lots. But it's not about healing. It's about wasting time, playing. Now the other point, but yet when we come to this thing about moonlight, notice the story. The god of moonlight is Tahuti, or Thoth. And Tahuti's primary companions, female companions, are the goddess Maat and the goddess Seshet. All three of these principles relate to states of mind, states of genius mind. The god Tahuti, or Thoth, was considered the perfect image of a super genius mind. Notice what that's saying. That Africans knew that inside of their own being, there was a part of them that was a god. Not a guess, but a reality. And it was a super genius quality. That meant that every African has a part of them that which we call that special black factor. You know when you're in a crisis and you got to show enough get down and you step on it and then you hit light warp speed and do something fantastic, and then if you're still in mental slavery, say, oh, what was that? Oh, I'm so happy the Lord saved me. You saved yourself. But you didn't give true credit to your other self. You see, the oppressor knows there's a little you and the big you. And here is a key point of the game. A key point of the game is to hypnotize Africans and to make them only believe that the little self is the only real one. And to dismiss the big self as fantasy, too good to be true. Or worse yet, Dracula or Frankenstein. Or the bad nigger. Any of those images or of super excellent achievement, the so-called super. Nothing super, that's just regular stuff. Africans called it the ka factor, the soul factor. It was this thing that was freed up by living a virtuous life and studying science. So the oppressor's game is to hide images of black excellence of mental function. When a black person like Michael Jordan plays basketball and shows great skills, they say, oh, it's what? Instinct. It's automatic. He didn't think it through. It's instinct. What is that trying? They're trying to hide no kind of instinct. He spent years and years of hard, diligent study and work. When it comes to a person like George Washington Carver, they do not want to talk about him at all. Why? Because George Washington Carver was the greatest living chemist on the planet in probably the past 10,000 years. But how did George Washington Carver become that? Did he go to Harvard? No, George Washington Carver led an ethical life and studied science and nature. In particular, George Washington Carver got up early in the morning while the sun was still down and went out in nature and held communion and conversation with the invisible realm. Meaning what? If you want to if you want to embrace your higher mind, you have to do it at a certain time in a 24-hour day cycle. It's scientific. In other words, you catch it at a time when your melatonin level is already reached its peak level at its midnight, and then shortly before daybreak, when the other deities are out there willing to converse with you. So say George Washington Carver could ask questions of his mind, say, I want to know this, and plant, what secret do you have to tell me? And then he could hear the plant talk back to him and tell him the chemical formulas and secrets. He was having a conversation with nature. Because George Washington Carver, just like you and I, are children of nature. I'm not out here trying to conquer nature. Why should I conquer my mother? Why should I conquer my father? They love me. And they've given me a mission here to do on earth. And if I'm true to it, I am blessed profoundly. And if I'm lazy, I get a little tight in the nut. But I'm still loved. But yet someone else doesn't see it that way. Someone else sees it as what? Oh, I only have half my melatonin key. I can't see as clearly. I'm confused. I don't even see what it is. And in my rage of confusion, I want to destroy everybody and conquer everybody. A statement of desperation. But nonetheless, Tahuti, again, during the darkness phase, was the perfect image of a super genius mind. And it said that there were 42 negative confessions that one had to practice, or that you did not do certain things. So that when you went to the judgment day, and judgment day is not just at death. Judgment day occurs every day. Because when we go to sleep at night, our super genius mind leaves our physical bodies, goes to the judgment hall, and gives a report to the ancestors. Ancestors say, do you qualify for some more information, or should you get a spanking today? You want to wake up depressed, or do you want to wake up feeling glorious? Are you willing to be adventurous and humble, or are you going to be arrogant and foolish? So again, this living relationship with the invisible realm takes place every day, not just at death. When you go to sleep, sleep is a kind of death, but so is a waking up, a rebirth. Now, very importantly, the goddess Ma'at was considered what was true, what was real. You know, in today's world, there's no such thing as reality. There is, they say you have the uncertainty principle. You can't weigh it and measure it at the same time. That's somebody else's formulations of nature, not ours. We said there was a right way and a wrong way. There was a right course for the sun to travel across the sky, and with a right way for light to enter into your eye, a right way for you to your family, a right way for you to find your mission in life, a right way to live. And Ma represented that. And she was the goddess, the chief judge in the hall of Mati, where there were 42 gods, and one had to face these 42 gods in the judgment phase when one passed into that realm on a daily basis and at the end of a cyclical basis. A last point, the goddess Seshet was considered to be the goddess of the Hall of Books. So again, all of these mental factors seem, from the African point of view, to be tied to the nighttime phase, the phase of darkness, that phase in which a person was actually in contact with their own God potential inside the core of their own mind. And again, they were doing so with a sound eye of Peru and using powerful chemical keys to unlock the doorway to their inner mind. Now, all these things I've taken some pains to go over in this second paper called the Kinetic Images of Light, which is also available. But let me just kind of bring this to a summary and to a close. We have questions and answers, if you so please. In looking at black dot, a person asks, what does black dot represent? Black dot, on the esoteric level, represents the door. Its technical name is door. Door, Dalet, dot, the unseen door. If you will, the 12th sepra on the so-called tree of life. And this door is a door by which energy moves from one realm to the other, from the spiritual realm, very fast-moving realm, into the dense material realm, or from the material realm, dense and physical, back to the spiritual realm. That Africans had defined this in a lustrous detail, in a super scientific manner, in the pre-dynastic era of Kemet. Kemet goes back over 100,000 years before the dynastic age. And that the African studies of science had gone on from the time of the parents of Kemet, Ethiopia, all the way back to the parents of Ethiopia. That is the study in Kui land by the African Ainu people who are the parent stock of all humanity, who were engaged in science and exploration over 1 million years ago. So I do not know how many civilizations rose and fell in that time, but I can say with absolute certainty that the pineal gland is a critical... Here we are. No, yes, not. Hello. I guess there's somebody I have to make an adjustment on one of these. But that was a critical point to raise, is that the black dot, doorway to light, moving through the different realms, sunlight and darkness, and that the study of biology is a strong study to show the the chemical basis for another level of expectations of human achievement. But that, in summary, that these statements of the biological aspects of humanity and psychology and spirituality are all in the library. And it is a game of propaganda, politely called propaganda, more forthrightly called lying, trickology, hustle and pimping of information, twisting and playing games with truth that keeps a person in the dark. Sigmund Freud studied African studies of psychology. He studied Osiris, Osir, Amenta. He said that he spent more time studying history than he did psychology. Carl Gustav Jung, same story. But the trick is how to keep these people asleep, or we can steal their treasures. But that day is over. That day is gone. Judgment Day has come. Judgment Day is here. It's 1992. 500 years have passed. That time of theft and control is past. It is the 500-year cycle of the phoenix that will rise and fly again. It is the end of a 6,000-year period, the 4 months perhaps of Ifa. But it is time, my sisters and brothers, for Ifa to come back on out of mental, to wake on up, step on out in the light, say, oh, it's a nice little rest. I saw some rough, I had some rough dreams there. But now that I can see again, I guess I'll be getting on back home. And by the way, bring my treasure on behind me. Thank you. Okay, we have time for questions and answers. So those of you who wish to ask some questions, maybe we have a mic downstairs so people can come to the mic and everyone can hear your question. Does anyone have a question or a comment? Yes, if you might want to come to the mic, so we can, or can they speak from? Yeah, we have a floor mic here. But maybe we can just use the mic with brother so everyone can hear. Yes.
Yes, so vitamin D.
Yes.
And calcium. That is true what you said. It's true that if a person has different type of disease, stuff like he, in reality, has vitamin deficiency.
Yes.
And the food that vitamin says that vitamin deficiency comes from the mother stuff. The reason why I say that is that the Egyptians believe that the vertebrate of a woman inside of her stomach, they call that chamber of the city of birth.
Okay.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Within that city of birth lies the bigger city that you see out here.
Okay.
Everything that you see out here is inside of her too.
Indeed.
Now, if you look at the woman as being a mother, now if she's being a mother of nature itself, the first thing that the white man had to do was get to her first. Because once you got to her, you got to the city of birth.
Yes.
And out of that negativity that you put in, came the negativity that you see today.
Yes.
So the question I'm trying to raise is that basically all the things that's happening to us as a species is we'll relax certain activities or certain type of hormones, certain type of secretions of the wrong negativity that brings about the change that you see today.
Well, I mean, that's a very critical point, and I was just trying to raise an issue that we really have tried to maintain our civilizations, but sometimes there are cosmic events that take place over great spans of history. And one of these may have been the onset of the cyclical ice ages that have occurred periodically. And so the people who live in those parts of the world in which the ice age did come on, for those folks who were trapped behind the glaciers, that whenever those ice ages come on, you're going to have a certain part of your population who are going to convert to light-skinned types and with a different kind of mentality. So that suggests that there may have been, in the history of our planet, many different ice ages and a repetitive cycle of the emergence of a devil from an ice age state. So that's a theoretical point, because I don't have the proof for it. But you raise a very important condition, a very important question, that is, no matter what the condition externally, if we have the right kind of way of handling ourselves internally, we can handle that condition. So you're asking me the question, well, what state of mind were my people in, our people in, that allow this condition to progress to a point of clear vitamin deficiency? For example, if you were in those regions and you saw that you were beginning to lose people from bone conditions, then why didn't you try to find a solution for that? I mean, were these people, for example, who, for other reasons, weren't able to find a solution? Was there conflict between Africans of some sort that promoted that kind of condition? And that I just don't know. But there is, again, for most mental states, one can ask what comes first? Is it the physical thought or is it the idea? And I just can't say which comes first, but I know that thoughts do shape the physical body. This is one example where not only does where the physical body, where the thoughts were being shaped in reverse by the physical body by a deficiency and a calcification of the pineal, then one could not embrace the higher thoughts that one would have to embrace to be able to hold that genius level of mind. And they begin to operate on a more material level, a more dense level, and begin to come across as paranoid, aggressive, and hungry.
Everything we take from vibration and sound. Vibration and sound reality. That Rodney King thing was a pure example of that. Because for 13 months, they didn't respect our vibration on sound. They heard it, but they didn't respect it because the vertebrate, not good. Now, the reality is that we see the film, but what we see wasn't the truth. So to control people, you don't respect their vibration, nor their sound, nor you respect their reality.
Indeed.
Because we represent the reality itself, and we represent the highest form of vibration and sound.
Indeed.
When you talk about sex, you said the color red. But red represents the color of passion. And passion is the lowest red is the lowest vibration color in the universe, which represents the devil itself. Dog is the symbol of passion, represents God. So in reality, when you deal with red, you deal with the red card. So you deal with the number, you not deal with the high. The number 3 itself is the number of reality. The 3 represents 12. It represents 12 high. It represents the fullness of something. So when you deal with the third eye, you are building the eye of reality. That's right.
Very good. Thank you, brother. Thank you for your comments. Very good. Thank you.
Given the differences in the physiology of African people as opposed to European, and with the melanin content, in the field of psychiatry, how should a person's practice be impacted by that information in terms of the types of psychotropic medications that are prescribed to illnesses like schizophrenia, illnesses like reactive stress?
Sure. And let me speak of the current day practice and what some prospects of the future might be. Current day practice, of course, I'm not speaking of the detail kind of way I gather that you are a practitioner of sorts. And in the current day practice of psychiatry is heavily impacted upon by the financial resources of the patient, and that there is a multi-tiered system. There is minimal care and there's best care. So those kind of dimensions. And that is, unless the person is a truly motivated practitioner, and often a starving practitioner, that a person usually, the way it is done, that a person who sees a person who has minimal resources is given minimal treatment. They are most often misdiagnosed and most often mismedicated and mismanaged. And examples of that, a person comes in, not too much family history is taken. They're reported to be psychotic, hearing voices, hallucinating, and delusions. They might have a toxicology panel done to see if they're on any kind of particular medications. Usually no other family members are contacted, and usually because the family members are talking to non-black people or non-sensitive black people, they aren't too willing to volunteer history. And so that usually there's no family history of 2 or 3 generations back that will show how these conditions arose. The diagnosis that is used most often is not that of depression, it's that of psychosis or character disorder. And the person is usually parked on a high dosage of medication, antipsychotic, and they're usually left on this high dosage of medication for long periods of time. And the compliance rate of the patient taking the medications are abysmal under those conditions. And So the person usually has repeated episodes of dysfunction as they go off their medications prematurely, and then they're forced to go back on, usually by court order. Usually, and if you're male, or depending if you're male or female. If you're male, quite often your behaviors are defined as being aggressive and dangerous, and you end up in the penal situation right quick. And so that your care and in the penal institution, and this is my experience, quite often in the penal institutions, people receive minimal care or no care, not even medications while in jail. Often thrust in the general population, and usually are abused, taken advantage of in the general population, or are left to be grossly psychotic until they will be easily misused when they go through the court process. And I've seen all of that. I've been a part of it as a practitioner all the way through. And that I know from my own personal experience. In a more ideal state, and so I'm saying it's not that mental health needs to be that ugly. It's not. It can be a lot more elegant than that. I've seen black practitioners and other practitioners who truly were committed to their patient. And they shine like a diamond ring. I mean, they dealt with their patient. They knew them on a personal basis. The patients would confide in them, tell them their detailed history, and many times it's certain this person has some kind of strange condition in which they would just have these sometimes affective illness states with another kind of medication, sometimes lithium, which has some other risks down the road, that they can sometimes be maintained on small doses, not no 20 milligrams of Haldol or 30, 40 of Fluorescence, sometimes just 1 or 2 milligrams of Fluorescence. And when they're in crisis, they would be seen to talk it out, not medicate it out, talk the stuff out and sort through the conflicts. And by that process, I have patients right now that I can tell right when they get ready to go into their psychotic phase, their sleep patterns unravel first. And so when they stop sleeping, and I say, oh, what's happening, Miss Jones? Oh, nothing's going on. That means let's talk about it, Miss Jones, because you many times are not aware of when things are really troubling you. And I take a detailed history and say, oh, and let's get your dreams. The dream content will many times show what the nature of the conflict might be. And I also talk to other family members. Oh, yeah, that's Mama doing her thing again. That's Dad doing his thing again. So we get this kind of history and catch it in the bud before it becomes full-blown. And also the medication levels are usually reduced. But many times a person, if they need to be on medication, they may not have to stay on it until they can resolve. Sometimes medication can be a lifelong thing, or many years, but it must be a dose that it does not remain the same dose. It has to be titrated up and down, dependent upon need. But again, the third-party payers many times put a cap on how many times a patient can come see the therapist. So they can't see the frequent monitoring. And if the therapist has to bite the bullet, then that whole story, and deal. But let's look to the future. What else is on the horizon in the way of treatments? What is on the horizon in the way of treatment is using light itself to treat affective illness states and depressional states and psychotic states, and using portable handheld magnetic field generators to treat certain affective illness states, postpartum depression, and certain psychotic conditions, and using mineral replacement, particular vitamin E as a mineral replacement in the treatment of certain what we call high oxidant or high free radical content type psychotic states. So those are some of the things that are right around the corner that will probably be employed. More so, of course, the light treatment of depression is currently in use even at present. So those are some of the, are you a practitioner, my brother?
No.
Yes, a practitioner involved in the same struggle. So these are the kind of struggles we go through. But I should say this: what I've usually found is that it is critical to get a life history of the patient, usually from other family members as well, because they're carrying the same issues generation from generation from generation, the same stuff over, and might be a little bit surface dress on how it is managed. Same issues being passed through multi-generations. Multi-generations. Other questions, sisters and brothers?
I was interested in what you were saying about the genetic philosophy of life and George Washington Carver.
Yes.
Study that. Based on that, is there any particular kind of sleep pattern you recommend to take advantage of that?
Sleep pattern, well, first, sleep needs tend to decrease with age. As you get older, the melatonin level automatically decreases with time in the uninitiated. In the initiated, I think it's just the reverse, the increase, because of some very profound things involving a thing called the solar egg moving through the central canal and energizing the chakras or the different granules that are along the spine. But back to the point. The point is that the sleep patterns, I would encourage a person to try to wake up around 4 a.m. and get, some people need 6, 8, some people need 5, 4. And usually trying to wake up around 4 so you can get that hour or hour and a half right with daybreak. That's such a profound time. Usually and again, I think each person has to evaluate themselves. Some of us are morning people, some of us are nighttime people. And to ask a night owl to get up at that time of morning would not be the way to go, because they just move like concrete in the morning, whereas a morning person moves like concrete at 10, 11 o'clock at night. So you have to see when is your phase of activity the greatest and when is your mind the most fluid. But for the morning person, that morning time of getting up at 4 a.m. is critical. And it's a time in which a person has a very fluid flow of thoughts and creative ideas. Yes?
What relationship does melanin have with DNA? Is melanin more fine at the finer relative than the DNA?
A very important question. And all questions are important. What relationship does melanin have with DNA? DNA is, again, the genetic blueprint that orders cells how to do their thing. And melanin has been indeed found in the DNA of mitochondria. DNA is present in the nucleus of a cell. It's also present in mitochondria in cell cytoplasm. And it is thought by some that in the early forms of living systems, that melanin was present even before there was DNA. DNA is a later development. Nonetheless, that we can look upon the cell, we have a chemical approach to life, a chemical theory of life. You can also look upon it in terms of an energetic approach to life, that is looking at the movement of energy from one system to the next in discrete quanta. Using that approach, melanin is a very powerful electron sink. It soaks up energy, and it can release energy in very discrete amounts. And it is in this discrete release that you have informational value, just like you have a computer chip storing energy in discrete amounts, releasing discrete amounts. So that melanin is indeed seen to have a very active relationship with DNA by being able to, in some way, modulate how much energy can be released into the DNA, at least in the mitochondria. And then they may play a similar role in terms of the nucleus. Should also mention that in the mitochondria, in the pineal gland, the mitochondria in the pineal gland are unique. They take up calcium, and the mitochondria is the energy storehouse. It's like a battery inside of the cell. It takes up calcium and uses calcium as a fuel. It doesn't even use ATP, the common gas of the cell, the common fuel. It uses calcium as a fuel producing agent. And that's unique. I don't even know what that's all about. So I guess in summary to your question, that the DNA is thought by some to be a later development, and that the earlier system that was able to capture sunlight, hold on to sunlight, and generate other chemical species was probably melanin itself in the early system. As to how melanin got there, some believe that melanin, which again, carbon, the key element that makes up melanin, is formed in the core of a star in the course of its stellar lifetime. That as the nuclei that make up the atoms that make up the fuel from the sun are compacted upon each other, more complex atoms are formed, and reaches a phase in which the outer phase is blown off. And so this carbon core is thrown into space as carbon molecules, or individual carbon atoms, and then coalesce in the gas clouds the interstellar gas clouds to form complex carbon-containing molecules, which later, by cometary movement, are then filtered down upon the planetary surface or impacts from meteorites or craters. So there's a theory of the impregnation, of the ongoing impregnation of the surface of a planet by carbonaceous material that had an interstellar gas cloud origin. So all I think is tied into your question. So it raises a lot of other questions as well. Yes, Brother Rob.
Yeah, part of doctors are concerned because the melanin, the chemicals that the doctors give black people, can defeat the pineal gland, like defeat the stimulation of it, or
Oh yeah, they're very.
Also, what can how can we change our diet or eating habits or anything that you recommend that would help stimulate the pineal gland?
Yes, very, very important. There are many conditions that can certainly decrease pineal gland function. Many of the tranquilizers, for example, do so by decreasing the duration of melatonin release and the amount of melatonin release, so that your tranquilizers, your Valium, Xanax will do that, alcohol will do that. Questions about high carbohydrate diets or frequent feedings of a lot of starches, for example, may also play a role with that. In terms of those conditions that will increase melatonin production, fasting will probably tend to increase it. Exercise will also, to a degree, will also promote melatonin release to a degree. So a person can, quote, run and get that runner's high and be immune to the pain of the run, of the lactic acid buildup. Very important ways, in terms of a very living organic way, is finding out what your life's mission is. That line of work, that when you pursue it, you feel yourself becoming light. That's a play upon words. L-I-G-H-T, energy, but light also in the sense of feeling very uplifted. Those things that make your toes tingle, so to speak, that make your spine tingle, that make you feel super alert, crystal clear, smelling fragrant smells in the air, that love kind of feeling, that those are very important feelings because there are ideas that initiate or activate the release of opiates. These are endogenous, naturally occurring hormones or peptides inside the brain that are 200 times more potent than morphine. So the quality, and also the opiates act in concert in a yin-yang fashion with melatonin. So the quality of your thoughts, and by this sense, quality relates to your pursuing a line of creative work. That is the thing that you were put here to do. It's your thing. The thing that you do not well, but brilliantly, without much effort. But then as you get into it, you have to do a lot more effort because that's your call. And you're supposed to raise it to a high level of perfection. So again, also those same kind of high-tone feeling thoughts occur in the quality of the interaction between a man and a woman. We know that. Between a parent and a child. And between fellow Africans in their communities. In other words, there's the pursuing of one's own mission, but also the maintenance of one's own family. And also said that the woman is a mirror of the man's soul, and the man is a mirror of the woman's soul. A woman can tell the man about his hidden other sides and what he needs to tighten up on, in the same fashion that a man can tell a woman about her stuff. The question is, do it gently. But you didn't listen to me. Do it gently, I'm told. And at the right time. But this notion of thoughts, the thoughts actually change the physical body, because as you pursue these thoughts and move on to progressive higher thoughts, the pineal gland will increase its hormonal amount of release. The other glands that it controls, the so-called growth hormone that controls bone structure, fat distribution, that also changes. So the quality of one's thoughts changes the shape and appearance of the physical body. That was also known. Sound, food, magnetic fields. But the one that I've seen, again, the one I've seen really, really work, are the quality of the thoughts. Food. Food is not only light is a kind of food, air is a kind of food, relationships, emotional relationship is a heavy food. Romance, sharp dialogue, whatever that means. All these things are foods. Words are foods. Ideas are foods. We need to look at it in a much more expanded kind of way. But those are major. And the key theme is that as you unfold the glands, these various glands will increase their hormonal output. So the hormonal output that we talk about in most parts is that of a neophyte, a person who's not practicing any of these higher science ideas of ethics and study of nature. But as you pursue those, the amount of melanin release increases profoundly. Yes, anyone else?
Thank you very much for the lecture.
Yes.
I'd like to ask a two-part question.
Yes.
There has been a conference, and it's been an annual conference, where a number of scholars have come together to discuss their recent findings on melanin. I forget the actual name of the conference, but it's just an annual conference on melanin. Is that still happening? That's the first part of the question.
Well, I'm the president of that group, so I should know. The name of the group is the Kimware Science Consortium, and they have met every year, including this year. And the last year, in '91, they met in Los Angeles. And they usually meet sometime in April. And this year, because of low finances, and I've also, if we didn't manage the group correctly, I take responsibility for the management of it, and also the mismanagement of it. The group met in a small conference in Memphis, Tennessee. So, and they will hold another national conference again in April of next year, '93, yet to be defined its location. But until then, they're having several mini conferences, which are like 2-day conferences, in which a local group will host the national group to come and give its presentations. And so that the next mini conference will be next Friday and Saturday and Sunday in Oakland, California. And then the one after that will be, I think, the last weekend in September in Baltimore, Maryland. And there may be one after that, I'm not certain as to where, and then there will be a big one again in April of '93.
So how will we get information on attending?
Well, I'll certainly make it available to sisters and brothers who are hosting this affair here. I'll certainly make that available. And the address, I can give you a general address at the end of this that you can write to in terms of Oakland, if you want to have direct contact. Or you can also, I'll give you my address as well if you want to stay in direct contact.
And the second part of the question is, could you give us a brief synopsis of the state of melanin? I know during the conference there's always a lot of new information that's being brought out.
Yes.
Could you give us a highlight?
Now, the highlights, I guess in terms of there are different specialties. I specialize more on the pineal side. The person who worked a lot with the melanin side is Carol Barnes. And Carol Barnes continues to work in a very strong way with that. And at this time, he's looking into the question of the binding of melanin to naturally occurring melanin, the binding of drugs to melanin. And so he kind of advises against the taking of a lot of the drugs that a physician might use for fear that they might bind very strongly with melanin and remain tightly bound over a long period of time. So that's one of the, and he continues to kind of spell that question out. In terms of the pineal gland, there has been an explosion of new knowledge. I mean, that stuff is, I mean, the general field is like just multiplying year by year by year. So, for example, in '92, we're talking about magnetic fields in the pineal gland, and that you can treat certain kinds of seizures, which are called seasonal seizures, by exposing a person to a magnetic field, a handheld magnetic field. And people are having 4 to 6 full tonic-clonic seizures a day, going down to 0. And so you can treat that with a handheld magnetic field generator, putting over the head, particular part of where the seizure focus originates, and having very good results. The treatment of certain kinds of depression with light, looking upon seasonal affective disorder and seasonal panic attacks as alterations in the pineal release of melatonin that you can then further modify by changing the time that a person is exposed to something, to a light source. Now, mind you, none of these folks have talked about what's the relationship between skin color and the level of pineal gland function. But I hope to have a paper submitted in the next 2 months that will address that. And also the issue of pineal calcification. So in 1992, both of those should be in print in some journal or somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, how you doing?
Yes, sir.
A co-worker of mine, he was accidentally shot in the chest.
Yes.
And it had a severe stress on his person, for his whole person, to the point that it actually turned his autoimmune system, turned him completely out of the process just without done that. I was wondering what effect did that have on his melanin in terms of his autoimmune system, in terms of just devastating the whole melanin process, in terms of just changing everything in his body.
That's a very critical one. It's shown that the pineal hormone melatonin does affect very important parts of the autoimmune system, in particular some of the T cells. So when a person melatonin level, for example, when a person gets depressed, he might have been depressed about being shot and immobilized. I don't know what the condition were around me, being immobilized, loss of income, the pain, chronic pain, and maybe the condition in which this accident occurred may have been very depressing for him. May have mobilized a lot of fear and rage, or a lot of sense of being overwhelmed. And he may have experienced a depression that would result in a lowering of his melatonin levels. And when the melatonin levels were lowered, then the cells that help mediate his autoimmune system became disarrayed. No longer, and the cells, rather than attacking against outside invader cell types, now began to misread his own body and attack his own body, and attack the melanocytes in his skin, and lead to albinism. And that certainly does occur as a stress reaction.
Is that to say that's permanent?
Well, usually there's I'm not up on that particular condition, but usually there's cell death. Usually there's death of the melanocyte. What he may want to consider is there's a person named Sank, S-A-N-D-Y-K, at Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York City, who would be quite familiar with these concepts. So he may want to consider going, that's not too far from here, and going to New York City, the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and talking to Ruth and Sank, or having to just consult with them in terms of the role of melatonin and the autoimmune system. But more importantly, that's our responsibility, so that maybe if I come forward in a year or two from now, I can say, oh yes, I know what to do, as your own physician. And that's why you come here to see me, to encourage me to continue on, and also learn from me and make others see the relevance of this kind of work and find how it works in your own life. He may also want to increase the melatonin release. He could increase his melatonin release by taking large amounts of tryptophan, that's present in bananas, for example. He may want to increase the amount of melatonin release. Now, I should have mentioned this. Do his problems get worse during the winter months or there's no seasonal pattern to it?
I couldn't say that.
He may want to look and see has the rate at which his problem has come. Well, he said it's almost complete now. It's almost his entire body now. So those are things. A pigmentation left behind his ear? Pardon? So that's only part of it. Yeah, he's probably lost most of it by now. Whether it's latent or dead, I do not know. Whether the melanocyte is latent, just inactive, or dead, that I just can't say.
Okay,
thank you, brother.
And also people who are involved in different religious societies who go through different initiations, and part of those initiations is there is some activation of the pineal gland. The Tibetan Buddhists, for example, who go through operate on the front that is part of the initiation process. I was just trying to get to are there people who are involved in activities stimulated and use this that perhaps we can learn from or get more information about the use of the pineal gland?
I think there are people who do have other practices that can be of value in terms of certain kind of eye practices. You mentioned the Tibetan eye practices in terms of eye exercises that are said to strengthen the pineal. And we also mentioned the comedic practices, that the quality of one's life in terms of the ethical practices and the studies of science and nature were another very profound kind of practice that had a very sustaining nature to it. There's probably a natural desire to find the quickest, shortest route, and that probably has short-term value. The other one is more of a kind of a long-term, life-term kind of approach. Again, many of these East Indian or Asiatic styles do have tremendous links with the ancient Kemetic parent sources. Hearing that when Kemet, that prior to the fall of Kemet, according to George G. and James Sloan Lake, there was a worldwide university system throughout the world with branches on all the major continents and headquarters in Egypt. And that when the old world fell, then these various places became out of contact with each other, and many of the initiate scientists, as they left Kemet, as it was being overrun, went south, went west, and went east into these various places as a place of sanctuary to continue their work and to continue their studies. So there was that kind of history to it. So a lot of them do have some of the same traditions.
The reason why I asked the question is I was wondering, you make reference to the Kemetic system, but I was wondering if there are any things you could point to specifically that could help a person who is looking for an institution to form some things that they can get involved in a real way.
Okay.
That point in the direction. I know, for example, there were classes in the LA area through the Aquarius Spiritual Center.
Yes.
Places like that. Are there other places perhaps that one can go to and get involved in a consistent way, something that can lead a person in that direction?
Yeah, sure. I think it's important to have support groups around you to kind of share information and keep certain disciplines active. And you mentioned the Aquarius Spiritual Center, who has a Black Gnostic Studies, and they have a mail order system that's kind of can be obtained any place in the country just by mail. And there are other groups. There is ASCAC, for example, that has active studies in which you've now formed in this area, in which you have a access to an international group of African scholars, sisters and brothers, who can show you the library, really, in terms of what books to have access to promote certain studies. So that one can go into the 42 negative confessions, the 42 assessors, and study these things in detail